Hey, everybody. This is episode number 3 of The Sports File, a 35-year reboot. Today's episode, we're going to cover a few topics. We're going to go over the Broncos and kind of the expectations on the season, and we're going to take a look at the draft that's coming up here in a few weeks. We'll do a weekly recap of how the Denver Nuggets played. We'll talk about the Tottenham Hotspurs and how they laid a big fat old egg. And then we'll talk about the great Satchels restaurant on 6th. First up, topic number 1, the Denver Broncos. Expectation setting for the Broncos, right? The Broncos started free agency last week. They were incredibly quiet during the first week of free agency. The big news, they weren't going to make a huge splash. We recapped on episode 2 last week. We talked about a lot how they were really sort of cash strapped with taking the hit on Russell Wilson and the whole Russell Wilson saga. So that really took a lot of, I think at that point, you have a lot of expectations, right? That this isn't going to be a very active team during free agency. They let players like Josie Jewell leave, and then they signed players like a Brandon Jones, Malcolm Roach, Cody Barton. These were all defensive players. Probably the biggest name that people would recognize that they re signed was Will Lutz, their kicker. So last year, right, we talked a little bit about it, is that they made a huge splash on day one of free agency. The Denver Broncos shelled out roughly 128 million on day one of free agency. And when you think about that, right, they're just not in the position this year to do something like that. And I don't think that they necessarily want to do that. I think they really are looking at a rebuild right now. That's clear. Just by if you look at the names that they've signed in free agency, they're just trying to, I think, find what they would say were some bargains out there. On the defensive side, trying to rework Vance Joseph's defense and come up with some players that would fit into the system pretty well. And so, really, I think what they're doing is trying to get out of the hole that they're in with the NFL draft, right, and the lack of draft picks that they have. You've seen them start to slowly try to accumulate some draft picks, just some like late round draft picks they've been able to get, but were very quiet this week. You'd look at maybe some potential starters, shoring up the bench, and I think their big focus will be on the NFL draft, right? Some of the changes that we're going to see this year, we've got the offense. They were able to trade Jerry Jeudy, which we talked about. Obviously, they cut Russell Wilson. Cushenberry, they let go as well. So we'll have a change there at the center position. What was, I think, more telling than not, which is leading into really the Denver draft and where they're probably headed, right, is they did not sign a veteran quarterback. So right now, currently, you've got Jared Stidham sitting as your starter and Danucci as the backup. Pretty, not really exciting to think about those two, right? Just being on your roster. I think Jared Stidham's a capable backup. I don't think he's been in the league now for a few years. Played for a few years with the Raiders. Now he's over here with the Broncos in year 2. And if you're not a full-fledged starter now, or you don't even show signs of it, you're probably not going to be that long-term solution. So I think it's pretty clear the Broncos, at least in my eyes, are looking at they need to get a quarterback, right? They're in a pretty good position. All the experts, the quote unquote experts out there, would tell you that this year's draft is incredibly deep when it comes to the quarterback position. Some of the mock drafts, if you start reading through, they have potentially 5 quarterbacks being selected in the first 12 picks. And really, in the first round, you could see 6 if you had Penix as probably the last one to go. So who do the Broncos really, when you think about who they might target, who are they really going to really try to go after? And I think right now, I talked a little bit of last week how maybe they could make a move and get JJ McCarthy. I don't think that is probably going to happen if we're being realistic right now. I think his stock has really risen. A couple of factors have led to that. I think he played under really a pro system in Jim Harbaugh, so he's kind of ready to go. He's not one of these quarterbacks that was looking at signs on the sidelines to get the plays. He was actually running a pro style offense, coached by the great Jim Harbaugh as well. So he's really ready to go. And I think he is also, when he got to the NFL Combine, the feeling around the league was he was thin. He's 6'2", and they thought at the time he weighed 205, which that's pretty thin for an NFL quarterback. When he got to the combine, his height was the same, 6'2", but it looks like he had added some weight and he got up to close to the 220 pound mark. To put that in perspective, I think Colin Cowherd said that best on his TV show and radio show this week. Is you think about that, that's someone that would look like Aaron Rodgers, almost the same height and weight. So I think that's why you're seeing JJ McCarthy move up in the draft. And everybody who speaks to him is this kid can do it all and he's ready to go and a proven winner. So what do the Broncos do? They're obviously not in a Caleb Williams or Daniels, or Drake May. So where would they go? And you really could see them at the 12 pick, really going after Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix, quarterback of Oregon, he's got a ton of snaps under his game. When you start looking at his career, he's played for 5 years. First 3 years he was at Auburn, put up pretty decent stats there. Was averaging, first year 16 touchdowns, second year 12 touchdowns, third year 11 touchdowns, where you saw his play start to really diminish at that point, which is when he entered the transfer portal, went to Oregon, and then that's where you saw kind of really his numbers start to rise. He was averaging, let's just call it just a little less than his completion percentage at Auburn was around 60%. Completion percentage at looking at Oregon in the 2 years he was here, his final 2 years in college football. Just looking at quickly, that's 71.9, a 77.4. Let's call that roughly 74 percentage completion rate. Really, really good. More importantly, you saw his average length of completion increase when he was at Auburn. He was in around the 6'7", 6'8" yards thrown. He was going up to 8.8, 9.6. And more importantly, you really saw, I think, the maturity in someone who's got a lot of snaps under his belt after playing for 5 years. His 2022 season at Oregon, he ends up throwing 29 touchdowns to 7 picks. And then his final year, he just put up just gaudy numbers at 45 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. This is a guy that, if you read some articles out there, you listen to some folks, listen to some people like a Joel Klatt, who's from Colorado, who's now working with Fox Sports and he's a lead analyst for their college football games. Really high on Bo. When they think about who he is, he's a pro-ready quarterback. Height 6'2", weight 217. 5-year starter, and also played all 5 years in college. So coming in with a ton of snaps, he's an excellent processor of kind of the progression routes. Where we talked last week, where we said, Russell Wilson is a guy where I'm going to see one. I have 3 different wide receivers out there. Russell steps back and he would look at the first option. If it's not there, he's on the move. He's running. He's trying to scramble. And more than likely, he's either going to hit somebody on the run or he's going to run for a few yards at that point. That's not Bo Nix. Bo Nix, when we say he's an excellent processor, that means he can go through the progressions. I've got 3 wide receivers. Say we've got a running back going out of the backfield and a tight end. I've got 5 different options, right? And he's going to work his way through. He'll look at wide receiver 1. He's not open. Looks at wide receiver 2. He's not open. Sees wide receiver 3. He hits him, and that's what's important. He can go through these progressions at a very high rate, is what I'll say, which means speed. He can, you've only got X amount of seconds in the pocket. You take 5 steps back. He's going through these progressions pretty quickly. He's able to make every throw on the field. When we mean every throw, that's things such as your short, your medium, your long routes. He can go through the route tree and see the progressions and see the different options, and then able to hit someone on time and very accurately. And I think those are the 2 biggest traits. If you start to do some research around Bo Nix, is that he's able to accurately throw the ball, which means the receivers are not having to, say, for example, jump up or dive or reach down low. He hits them, quote unquote, in stride, in their hands, up around their chest. And like we were saying earlier, the biggest thing he gets his ball out on time. And that is all about what Sean Payton is about. He's got a system. I think what we saw last year in Denver was kind of a dumbed down version of his offense. And what he was trying to do was really play up to Russell Wilson's strengths. And Sean Payton talked about this, when he was working, took the year off and worked for Fox. He was on the Colin Cowherd show, The Herd, and he talked about how if he was to fix Russell Wilson, at the time his year one was terrible with the Broncos, he would say, I'd really want to see what kind of his top 10, his highlight, quote unquote, highlight reel is, right? So, what does this guy do really, really well? And what are some things that he doesn't do well, and avoid those things? And so I think he really dumbed down his offense because he knew Russell is really looking at one option, needs a strong running game, needs tremendous running game to be able to at least give the hint that they're going to be running the ball, and that frees up the pass typically. He needs a lot of protection back there. Bo Nix does not need a lot of protection. You can really just drop back your offensive line, which gives you, like we were saying, the 4 to 5 different options that are out there running various routes, and you'll be able to push the ball downfield. And I think that's what Bo Nix does incredibly, incredibly well. And that ties exactly into Sean Payton's what he really wants to do. I think he wants to expand, get back to the playbook that he was running in New Orleans with Drew Brees. And he really, really wants to get a quarterback that he can kind of groom and put his mark on it. And then this will be the ultimate test, right? With Sean Payton, he's now got his guy. He's got, he'll start the rebuild process with the team. We'll probably see next year a little bit more turnover. But you'll really start seeing him kind of rework the roster because if we're being honest, everybody talked for years at how look at the talent that we have on offense with the Broncos. My gosh, we have all these players. We have tight ends. We have wide receivers. Think about the guys through the years that have been injured at tight end. Jake Butt never made it really out there. We've got Tim Patrick. He's been hurt the last 2 years. Jerry Jeudy did nothing. I would argue he's a bust, right? You've got Cortland Sutton, who was their most consistent receiver, but he's dealt with some injury issues and he's pretty expensive at this point. This is a time for players like Mims, who was drafted last year under Peyton, to really step up, take that spot of a Jerry Jeudy, for example. So he'd be your number two option. You'd have Cortland Sutton as your number one option still. He re-signed Little Humphrey back from New Orleans, who started last year. He'll probably get a bigger role. Look for them. The draft this year is incredibly deep when it comes to wide receiver. So you're going to be able to pick up guys, whether it's in the third, fourth, fifth round, maybe the sixth round, even. That will be potential, get some significant playing time with the Broncos, and this would put Sean Payton's stamp, what I was saying earlier, on the organization. And now it's really all on him. Is Sean Payton a guy who can groom and get players to play for him, or is he just kind of where his best years, with Drew Brees, and was it really, like a lot of times everybody says great coaches need a great quarterback? Was it really having a great quarterback in Drew Brees? We'll see. Bo Nix would be a great, I think, in my opinion, a great addition, especially where you're getting him with the 12th pick. And to close it all out, when you look at his stats, right, 74 touchdown passes and just 10 interceptions in 2 years at Oregon, comes in, probably would, I would imagine, if he doesn't start right away, he's one of these quarterbacks that's starting by Thanksgiving, sits underneath Jared Stidham, and when he's ready, he goes out there. It's a big reality check for the Broncos. 500 would be, I think, a miracle if they finished close to 500. I mean, technically, I guess you can't with the 17 game schedule, but if you could get 8 or 9 wins out of this team, I think that would be something else. I think Broncos country, we've got to really think about it because we're really probably looking at more like a 4 to 5 win team that is really trying to rebuild next year. I mean, right now where they currently sit right now, they're 23 million under the cap, according to Over the Cap. .com, and if you look at after the draft, they'll have about $16 million remaining to spend. So maybe you can pick up, like with injuries, you might have to pick up a veteran to kind of carry it forward for the rest of the year. My guess is they're going to try to roll over as much of that because you can actually roll over that 16 million and add it to your cap next year, which helps you even further. You can expect the NFL to further increase that draft cap limit upwards, right? And then also rolling over the 16 million, it's going to really help absorb and offset the cap hit of close to $63 million for Russell Wilson next year. Topic number two, the Nuggets recap. So let's think about the Denver Nuggets last week. We released our last episode. We talked about how they were absolutely rolling over the last week or so. This week, pretty good week when we look at kind of where they ended up as they kind of continue this march towards. Be great to get the number one seed. They're currently the second seed in the West. I think their goal absolutely is to try to get that number one seed. They had a long week. They had four games as I'm looking at it now. Came out basically 3-1. They easily could have been 4-0. We'll talk about the last game last year, obviously, but Nuggets went in, absolutely rolled the Raptors. Nuggets win by a score of 125 to 119. It really wasn't that close. You look at some of the stats here, who's putting up some of the numbers, no surprise whatsoever. Nikola Jokic, yet another triple double. Nikola comes in with 35 points, 12 assists, 17 rebounds. Jamal Murray throwing in 26 points, 12 assists, 5 rebounds. And then you've also got Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon with 19 points apiece. I think it's been great to see Michael Porter really continues to grow and really shine. He's definitely their third option for scoring right now. And then you throw in Aaron Gordon and KCP to round up their starting five. The Nuggets went in and did their thing like they've been doing and won that first matchup at the beginning of the week. That was back on Monday. Then traveled to Miami, so they got the lovely privilege of missing our March snowstorm here. They were in beautiful Miami, and the Nuggets end up winning by 12 points by against Miami. Miami, pretty good team still, right? 35-30. Nuggets now increase their record up to 46-20. You look at again some of the highlights. Michael Porter Jr. leads the way with 25 points. Played an amazing game, great game. 34 minutes he clocks in at. Aaron Gordon 16 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Really kind of dominating. In the lower paint area and the post area. Really, really did a great job. Nikola Jokic again just putting in kind of a very casual day for him. 12 points, 6 assists. 14 rebounds, and Jamal really, really kind of took the backseat in this one. 14 points, 5 assists, 12 rebounds. Really, you can see where I think what's awesome to see with this team as well is they don't need Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray to dominate every single game, right? They don't. They can afford that these guys kind of take it easy and they can rely on guys like Michael Porter Jr. And Aaron Gordon to pick up the slack when they're kind of quote unquote having an easier night for themselves or having an off night. Then after that, Friday, Nuggets travel to take on the Spurs. And Jokic just here we go again, right? Jokic and Murray leading the way again, 117-106, another W. You see Nikola put up 31 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. Jamal coming close to the triple double, 15 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, playing 34 minutes. Michael Porter Jr., 13 points, and then Aaron Gordon, 7. So you can see almost the exact opposite, right? Your two big players carry the weight of this team forward in Jokic and Murray, where Porter and Gordon then take the back seat and where it's essentially swapped. And then comes the big game, the final game of the week. Amazing game to watch. It was a Sunday afternoon game. We're looking ahead and we think about the playoffs when the Nuggets get into the playoffs. The Mavericks is a tough matchup for them. These games are pretty back and forth. And if I recall correctly, it was like this last year as well. This is just a it's a you've got Luca there who's just incredible. Looks eerily familiar, eerily sized guy, right, to Jokic. This was just an amazing game to watch. At one point, I made a note here. The Nuggets were down by 12 in the fourth quarter. Fought their way back. Just an incredible game coming back to get it tied with a few seconds remaining in the game, and then Kyrie Irving hits a game winner. with literally like a second left on the clock to win this game out. Jamal Murray throwing up 23 points, played an amazing game, 36 minutes. Jokic clocks in with the most minutes at 39. Um, just loses out on a triple double, has 16 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists. And then you've got Aaron Gordon, really did a lot more on the defensive side. He was really, really strong down low, capturing rebounds. He had 8 rebounds in this game, contributed 11 points. And then Michael Porter Jr. doing what he does best in that score, capturing 20 points, 3 assists, 7 rebounds. If we look at the week ahead for the Denver Nuggets right now, they have, after their quick road trip game that they had there, they have the Timberwolves that are going tonight. They're continuing their. This will end kind of their road trip. A quick this road trip that they've been on the last couple of games. They're at Minnesota tonight. I think they're favored by 8 tonight. They should win that. Then they come home. They play the New York Knicks. That's going to be a pretty good game. New York Knicks are kind of a feisty team playing pretty well. And so then they'll end up on Saturday. Their next game is on the road again versus the Trailblazers, and then they come back home Monday on the 25th to play the Memphis Grizzlies. So Nuggets doing all they can. They're still in it, still fighting through, trying to get to that number one seed. I think technically they are, yeah, they're tied for the second seed right now with Minnesota. So that's going to be a big game coming up here. I just can't see OKC holding on to that one seed. Could be wrong. They are playing pretty well. They've won 2 in a row. Their last 10, they're 7-3. But they've got if you look at the strength of schedule, they've got still a few back-to-back games that they've got to play. Nuggets only have 1 or 2 remaining, so they're in a pretty good shape to get on a little bit of a winning streak and hopefully overtake it. They're not that far back. They're only a half game back when I talk about this. That's separating the first team. The Thunder, Timberwolves, Nuggets are all separated by a half game. After that, it's the Clippers coming at 5 games back. Topic number 3, the Tottenham Hotspurs. So Tottenham went into Fulham and just absolutely laid a goose egg. This was a game Tottenham needed to win. If you just looking them up now, they were in the 5th position. They had a move where they could get up to the top 4. What does the top 4 mean? I've talked about this a little bit, but I've never truly defined it. Top 4 for the in soccer, especially in the big leagues like Premier League, the top 4 qualify for Champions League. So you have your league that you're a part of. In, for example, England, it's the Premier League. In Spain, it's La Liga. And then each sort of quote unquote country has their own league, right? But those you get the kind of gist of it. You've got the Premier League, and what they do is they take all the various leagues in France and Germany and Italy and Spain and England, and then they combine them, and it's called the Champions League, and that's kind of essentially the champion of Europe. And these are big name teams, and they're always gunning. And so what happens is the top 4 teams will make it into Champions League for next year. And you essentially have to play league play, and then you play your Champions League play. You can argue what's more important. I think, everybody wants to win their own league title, but winning the Champions League is such a big, big deal. We had the opportunity, my son is studying over in Madrid. So we had the opportunity to tour the Real Madrid stadium. Saw their trophy case. Real Madrid is just a completely storied franchise, incredible, rich lineage. They've won the Champions League 2 years ago. They've won it multiple times. Just one of the top teams in Europe. So that you're kind of trying to gather these quote unquote cups, right? And so Tottenham goes into Fulham, and they just came out flat. They didn't play anything like they've been playing. They looked like they had not a lot of energy. It was almost as if they weren't, I don't know what they weren't feeling well. They just were not into it. They did not have the offense. They were not pressing like they normally do. The ball movement was sloppy. Their passes were not crisp and on time. And they just did not. They had a couple of chances where they absolutely should have scored. And they just made really some boneheaded mistakes where they get the ball and they close the net and they sky it right up over the net, and they had an easy goal. You've got to hit that, especially against a team like Fulham. Fulham is just like if we were to look at Fulham, who they are right now, and we look at the league standings and whatnot, I mean, it's just Fulham right now. To put it in perspective, there's 20 teams within each in the Premier League. Tottenham's sitting in fifth, Fulham's 12th, so they're a mid-table team. Not, just I don't even know the best analogy to describe them, but if you were to think about like American sports, they're kind of like a 500 team, right? They're going to win three, over their last five matches, they might win three one week, lose two, or they might win, lose, something like that, or then they might have a week where they lose two and win three over their last five games. So just kind of this was a must win. You got to win this game if you want to get into the top four, where your goal is to get back into the Champions League, especially where you're a big name club like Tottenham. And it's been years, and we'll talk probably next week, kind of this drought of Tottenham. I'm going to spend a little bit more time because I think it's worth it, and we'll probably we'll always talk about Broncos, but we'll really do a deeper dive into Tottenham and the history of them and the cups and what they're trying to do next week, because they need to get back in the top four. They're not going to win the Premier League this year, no way. I think you've got too many good teams right now in front of them. Arsenal and Man City are going to, and Liverpool are battling it out. They're separated by 1 point. Aston Villa's then 6 points behind them, and then you've got Tottenham kind of way back. So the leader has 64 points, Tottenham's at 53, and they're not gonna take the cup for the Premier League. So you've got to be able to get into the Champions League. So more to come on that next week. Topic number 4 to close out this week's episode is a restaurant review of Satchels on 6th. This is another one that's one of my wife and I's favorite restaurants in Denver. It's down on, call it 6th and Gilpin, if you're in the city of Denver and you're familiar, kind of the Congress Park where it transitions into, I guess, sort of the Cherry Creek-ish area, but it's really kind of the dividing line between Congress and Cherry Creek. Great restaurant, been there for probably at least 10 years in the current location. It used to be located up in Park Hill many years ago, and then it moved over to that location. Just great, awesome restaurant when you walk into it. It's small, so be prepared. You definitely need to make a reservation. It's the inside of it is totally unique. You've got these crazy chandeliers, crazy artist paintings by one of the workers there, JP, he's from France, and he does these crazy paintings on the side that are beautiful. Great little bar in the middle. It's kind of typical horseshoe type of bar in the middle that takes up a huge space. And then you've got tables that line along the side. And then in the nicer weather, they have tables outside. Menu is kind of traditional, what we would say probably New American. They've got a theme. They've got like their burger of the week. They've got like usually some sort of a red meat dish. It's usually a hanger with all these different sides. They've always got seafood options on the menu as well, like whether it's a crudo or scallops, something like that they have going. And more importantly, the staff there is just outstanding. The chef owner, Andrew, is a great guy. The wait staff, they've all been there for years. I mean, literally years. And during COVID, they all, when they had to shut down, they continued to pay them. They all came back. They all worked for him. Great food. Had the hanger steak special, which was great. There, we also had this kind of, they always have a chicken dish, but this was like a fried chicken Caesar salad type dish. The Caesar salad was unique, where it had Brussels sprouts and then also I believe it was kale that was in there as well, and it was really really great. So get the opportunity. We go there probably at least once a month. Great restaurant, Satchels on 6th. That's it for this week's show. This has been the Sports File, a 35-year reboot.